What's up, everybody? Welcome back to my channel. I am going to do things a little bit differently, I think, from now on. Instead of just doing a B-roll of the beer as I review it, I'm actually going to take you through the process of what I do to edit these beer photos while drinking the beer. Right here we have Trapezium Mexican Lager out of Petersburg, Virginia. It's another amazing beer. And seeing how tomorrow is Cinco de Mayo, it's kind of fitting for right about now, this time of the year. Now, let's get right into this photo edit. All right, so I start everything off in Lightroom, but all that I use Lightroom for is to crop the photo, select a little profile based, color, vivid, landscape. I went with landscape because it enhances the greens, and you can see that there's a lot of green in this image. And then the last thing I do is the lens correction in Lightroom. After that, I send it to Photoshop. Everybody has a different workflow. This happens to be mine, and it works well for me. So I have all these actions pre-made, and I'll go through what they all do and how to actually do the individual actions in a future video. So for right now, I'm just going to get this one started, and it's going to set up a new layer here, make it smart, rename it, and then set up the camera raw filter, which is basically everything you could do in Lightroom, except here in Photoshop. Kind of keeps it all in the same area. This little amber bomb, so good. All right, so you double click on camera raw and it's gonna open up. Let me just drag it over to the right monitor. Wow, it looks very similar to Lightroom. All right, so the first thing that I do is I look at it, make sure that there's not really anything too messed up with it. And if there is, I'll just come back later and fix it. Now I'm not a big fan of using the perfect white balance on these images, but it's a good starting point. Now that I feel like that one's a little too yellow, might be good for you. I'm just gonna crank down that yellow just a little bit, maybe like 8. 8 is good right there. Now the next thing I do is I come here to curves. This whole curves feature right here, it's ridiculous. There's so much involved. You just have your standard exposure, and then you have the red versus the teal, green versus purple, yellow and blue. And these all change everything around. Well, I'm going to go over this in depth in a later video. Everything I'm going to, let's just go ahead and say everything I'm going to do will be in a future video, seeing how I have 3 videos at this point. All right, back to this. So what I'm going to do here is just kind of bring it down just ever so slightly there. And you can see where this is in relation to your histogram up here, that we're kind of working at the higher end of the shadows, very close to what you would consider your exposure. Now, I like where that's at. Now, this totally different for you. This is just all my editing style. But then I'm going to come here on this line. I usually aim for right here on this grid line or just to the left of it. And I just want to bring that up just a little bit. And you can see how that area is directly related to your kind of shadow highlight area. It's right about here. It's kind of it's spaced by more of your exposure layer. So now once that's set, come back to your basic area here. Now, if you're good with this, you're good with this. I like to add a little bit of contrast to my photos. Drop down the highlights just a little bit because they're always so overwhelming, especially using any type of studio light. I actually use natural light on this. What you guys can't see behind you is these 2 massive windows, and I had a 36-inch diffuser there, and it still just blew through this the diffuser, and all that kind of made it just a little bit you could see it over there where the C and the A and the G and the R. Hopefully we're able to fix that. That's good. All right, so where was I? Shadows. Let's crank those down and see what they look like. Now, you see the problem with the shadows here is look at the beer. If I drop it too low, it makes the beer too dark, but it makes that background nice. But I'm always playing for the future. It's like a game of chess. So I like that beer to be a little bit brighter, but now in the future, I'm going to come down and lower this background area a little bit. All right, next. whites. Once again, that's like the high end of what my diffuser couldn't help out with there. So I'm just gonna kind of drop those down as low as possible. You have to be careful though. If you take the whites out of everything and if you take the highlights out of everything, Photoshop doesn't know what to do with those pixels, kind of like in here on this image. So what happens is it just kind of fills it with this purple color, and I have ruined some great portraits because of that. Anyway, let me just undo both of those. All right, kind of like that. Blacks. Now, the blacks are up here, and they're on the far end of your histogram. And there's a lot of blues in there, kind of some reds, even a little bit of green and yellows, every color in the spectrum there. So if I crank this down just a little bit, or actually a lot, see how it just kind of destroys everything. So this is what Photoshop is picking up as blacks. It's all this area. It's way too much, obviously. I don't think I need more than like 10. Yeah, 10 is like perfect. All right, texture, clarity, dehaze. Do not use dehaze unless you really, really, really need it, because as you can tell, it is a very powerful tool. I could probably count on one hand how many times I actually used it correctly. Now, clarity and texture. Watch what happens to the beer can and the beer when I crank up the texture. You can see every little wrinkle and bubble in that. So we don't want to have to work harder here. So we're just going to put that back down to 0. Clarity. Clarity is going to lift your blacks and kind of separate your blacks from your whites a little bit more, like where you get these contrasts. As you can tell, that like there's no clarity, and then you can see how it's kind of helping out with that contrast area. So I'm not going to crank that up too much either. All right, vibrance. Think about a 49 there is good. Now saturation. Saturation, like if I turn it all the way down, we got a black and white image. If I turn it all the way up, we have something that, I don't know, looks like something out of like the 90s. It's garbage. We're not going to go all the way up either with it. I'm actually going to desaturate it just a little bit. Like maybe 8 is good. I like 8. So now if you click this eye up here, you can see before and after. Kind of not feeling this purple. Look like right here. And you can see that when I did the auto white balance correction, it kind of gave me a lot on the tint. And if you look there, it's kind of making that label a little too purple. So let's just slide this guy down a little bit. Too much. Maybe right about there, 19. I could look at that. All right, close that. We already did with our curves. Color mix. All right, so this is what I do for the first layer. Now, some people might be done with this, and if I would have run this through just Lightroom and not wanted to just make it pop just a little bit more, I'd be done. Just export it, post it to Instagram, and bam, y'all like it. But what we're going to do is we're going to take it to the next level. And Photoshop has an insane amount of features, so much more than Lightroom. And that's why I like Photoshop more than Lightroom. If you're just trying to do something quick, easy, or if you don't really need the extra features, Lightroom is great. And I cannot wait to teach you guys all that. Let's get back to the beer now. It's not the type of beer you're going to put a lime in. Let's just say that. However, it is very good. It's kind of like sweet, almost like honey, kind of like the color of the beer. Can't be upset with it. It's actually really, really good. Back over here. All right, so all I did was clicked OK, and you can see here's the layer here. It's the initial change, and there's your smart filter and camera raw. The best thing about smart filters is if you ever want to change something, like as long as you don't make a new layer and stamp the image on top of it, you can come back here and you could change anything you want whatsoever. And you probably will. So next, let's focus on dodge and burn. Now you have dodge and burn features over here. So here's your burn tool, and then there's your dodge tool. It's a little magnifying glass. You can see a little animation there about what it does. That just shows you how much I use it, that it still gives me the like the tutorial videos on it. All right, so first let me set my brush down here to about, I usually go somewhere between 10 and 15 depending on the image. So now in this global dodge and burn folder, I just have 2 curve layers. And the curve layers are super simple. Down here where you could do an adjustment layer, you click here, click curves, and then it pops up here. Now dodge, it's going to be brighter. Burn, guess what? It's going to be darker. So what I do here is I have this preset, and this gives you just so much more control than over there. Now I also invert the layer masks so that way they're black, because black, as with Photoshop, nothing shows with black. That's how you hide stuff. Now white, on the other hand, I'm just going to invert it real fast. It reveals everything. So I'm going to make it black first and then just hide it. So that way I can just reveal the area that I want to reveal. Now with dodge and burn, you could do some, actually you could do a lot of correction with it when it comes to like blemishes on the face and like little pimples and stuff like that. But this one's a more powerful version. Think of this as like big dodge and burn. I'm just looking around and seeing where the light hits and if I want it to be brighter. So I'm gonna make my brush bigger. You can see right here on your right hand side that that little white means that I'm revealing just a little bit of light on it. You can click the eyeball to see what I'm talking about. It's subtle, it's nice. But inversely, you can't just take, you gotta give too. So I'm gonna make this area just a little darker right up in here. Come on this side of the can, do the same thing. And now you can see how the light here is wider and it kind of encompasses the entire can, but the light here is a little bit more like potent right there in the center of it. Now I don't like how this area looks right here, so I'm gonna hit X because that's how we hide everything. And come back here and just kind of come up and down a few times. Okay, a lot better. All right. Now let's look at the beer. Right here you see how it's a little bit darker, and actually I just burned it there, so let's undo that. Now we come here to dodge and see if lightening this area up makes the beer just pop a little bit. Yep. Now look at this. Before and after. All right. Now let's go back to dark here. And what else do I want to like kind of hide from your eye? And kind of be like a magician here. I'm gonna darken this area, that area, leave it dark that area too. All right, and now we have before and after. All right, so now my favorite thing to do here in Photoshop is what I like to call color grading. No, okay, it's not just me. That's kind of dramatic. It's everybody calls it color grading. It's how you make the image yours. It's how somebody could be scrolling through Instagram and they're like, "Oh, that's late stage photography," like, and just know that that's your image. It's your stamp of approval. It's what you make your image look like. And there's a bunch of different ways to do it. I'm gonna go over a couple here, just a few, so I can get this image done for tomorrow when I post it on Instagram. So I'm gonna come up here. Actually, I'm not, because I don't have my color grading set. I'm gonna come down here to an adjustment layer. The first thing I like to do is hit it with a gradient map. Once again, I'm turning it black and white. And if you look up here, the gradient map shows you that the darker pixels are going to be hit with black, while the lighter pixels are going to be hit with white. Now, I like that, but obviously I'm not trying to do a black and white image here. So now if I came here and I reduced it, it's like, okay, it's kind of killing the vibe a little bit. So we'll bring this back up to full so you can see what I'm about to do. Click here on blending type. This box right here is blends. You have all these different choices of blending, whatever you want to do. What I find works the best for mine is soft light. And look at it. It's perfect. It's done. No, it's not. Just kidding. Now I'm going to drop the opacity on it to maybe 33. I like 33. So now if you look, you can see how in the background, the black, like this, the background is getting a little bit darker. The shadows are getting a little bit more emphasized in the, like, my first thing I'm looking at is the label where it says Mexican lager, which is what you want in the photo. Well, at least that's what I want in this photo, is for you to look there at that label. All right, so now the next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna hit L for lasso tool. And you see how you got this little lasso? Looks like a little bolo tie. I think that's what they're called. Is that what they're called down in Texas? The bolo tie, the one like the. Please help me out if it is. Just answer below. This thing gets better. Like, I am so happy to be doing this. Like, this beer is just incredible. All right, so lasso tool. What I'm going to do with the lasso tool is I'm going to make my background stand out a little bit more than my foreground. So I'm going to come through here and just try kind of roughly trace where I want it to be. We're going to come back and fix that up here momentarily, so it does not have to be perfect. All right, so now come down here. See where my mouse is? There it is. Click Adjustment Layers, Brightness and Contrast. And what I did was I already applied my selection to this layer. If you look here, the top of it's white, so that's where I'm going to affect, but the bottom of it, I don't want to affect, and it's already black. It's just a quicker way to do it. Once again, it works for me. There's 1,000 ways you can do this. All right, so now up here you have brightness, which is pretty self-explanatory. I want it to be bright or dark, however you really want it. And then contrast, once again, bright and dark. So now my whole purpose for doing this is I want the background to kind of stand apart and away from the foreground. The foreground being the Drufen box, the Mexican lager, and the actual glass. I want this to be there, but be like just there, not in your face. So I'm going to turn down this brightness a little bit. Okay. Now, if you add contrast, it's kind of a little bit more still there. But if you remove it, it kind of blends together. Like if you look on the left where all these LED lights are, it's kind of becoming more of like one. And now when I look at the image, I'm looking there first. So I'm just going to bring this back up. And maybe right about there. Wow, that looks horrible. I know that's what you're all thinking. Like, geez, Mike, what are you teaching us here? Well, I'm going to switch to my brush tool by hitting B or clicking the brush tool right here. And that's going to bring up, well, the brush tool. Now I can refine my edge a little bit. I'm going to click here on the layer mask, flow for my brush. I'm going to bring it back up to probably like 75. Because when you do the lasso tool, this becomes 100%. So that's what this would look like at 100%. Now, if I were to do 100% right up to the can, the cup, and the box, it looks too obvious. So I want to come here. I usually just pick somewhere between 70 and 75. So that way there's like a little bit of a fade between the two. All right, so now what I'm going to do is first make my brush smaller. Remember, white shows, black conceals. Right here, you have this line in an area that I don't want that line. So I'm going to hit black and just start painting. And it's gone. So now I'm going to come here and click X again to switch my brush. And I want this to be as close to the can as possible. See how I'm just blending it in? And if you actually hit the can a little bit, it doesn't matter because it kind of just blends into that shadow that we've already put there. Same thing with the glassware. Make the brushes a little bit smaller, come through here in the middle. Perfect. Now you can take as much time as you want doing this, or as little time as you want doing this. It's all based on what you want. This is going to be on Instagram, and it's not going to really need, you're not going to need to like zoom into this and see every little pixel on it because Instagram compresses your photos a little bit. All right, so I like that. I like how that looks. Now, before, after, it's separating the front from the back. Next, I'm going to come here and do a color lookup because I have all the green, and we all know that yellow is the opposite of green on the color scale. So I want to see what it's going to look like with edgy amber. We're going to go with edgy amber. Ooh. Oof. That looks like a person that's going through like their black makeup and Betty Bangs phase. It's definitely edgy. So we're gonna tone this down a little bit. Like you don't need to be so jaded your photo. All right, so let's see what it looks like in soft light. Soft light is the go-to. Like if you ever need anything and you're doubting, like, what should I do that in? Just pick soft light. Can't go wrong with soft light. Now I'm just gonna drop this all the way down to like 15% to start. All right. So it's kind of actually adding like a nice little orange to this can right here, which is cool because it makes me feel like I'm about to drink this beer after work, like sunsetting. Kind of happy with just 15%. Sweet. All right, so moving right along, I'm gonna hit my cleanup layer. Now this is gonna pull up a layer that I already had pre-designed with the clone tool. So I'm gonna zoom in here. I'm gonna start working these lines out. Well, not these lines per se, because these are their logo. This line right here has been irritating me this whole photo. It's gonna be rough because I'm not trying to mess up any of their design, and I'm not trying to get these red dots out of here either. Oh, too much. All right, so let's see what it's gonna look like with the healing brush. Perfect. So I'm hitting Command or Alt, depending on if you're Mac or PC. And I'm selecting an area close to where I want to fix. And I'm coming back in there as close as I can without affecting their design. Like if you're ever editing a portrait and you've got like hair in the model's face, this is probably what you're going to end up doing, but just a lot more. All right, let me just go right in here. Oh, that shadow came out. Still there. All right, so I got the highlight side of it. Now I'm going to work this darker portion. See how I'm clicking? I'm selecting this area right here for it to be replicated right there. This guy too. And this little guy down here. See, I'm happy you all saw that. So if you go too close to where there's a lot of contrast, that's what happens. So we can just fix that by undoing it, making the brush just a little bit smaller. And what I like to do is start at the end here in that situation and push up, problem solve. So now, looks pretty good, right? Before, after. Before, after. Let me just get this one little spot. Perfect. All right, so I had to come back here to the cleanup layer because I realized that this line here with the where the light on the glass was a little too harsh. Now, there's plenty of ways, once again, you can do this, but the quick and easy way, let's say, is come back here with your healing brush. Make your brush just a little bit bigger than what you need. Sample somewhere here. If you come through, gives you this nice little blend. Make it just a little bit smaller and get this top right here. Perfect. So remember how before on the can, when I came down here with the healing brush, it kind of made that horrible line because it hit that contrast. Now, same thing here, except you're using it to your advantage this time. If I would have come here and actually come through this whole area, you can see that it blends it a little bit more. So if I would have hit here, it's a little bit lighter of an area instead of a darker area, I can almost make that light look so much softer than what it is, but we're going to keep it just like this. Man, maybe I'll add a little bit more to like right there and just a little bit more there to kind of soften that light just a smidge. I don't like that last one. Okay, now let me just get like right here too. And now you have a much softer of an image. So once again, now look here, and I'm going to go before and after. Before and after. It looks like your light was just that much softer, which should have been, but like I said, it was really bright out when I was trying to diffuse it. So now I'm going to come here to Final Raw Edit, which is the same thing as my first camera raw. It's literally the same action, just named differently, so Photoshop would allow me to do it. double click down here, and this familiar thing comes back up. Now, before I was really subtle with it, but this time I'm adding my stamp to it. This is almost like another color grading style, and I'm going to actually use the color grading feature on it. So if you're familiar with Premiere, this year Photoshop changed it to what is more like Premiere with the wheels instead of the traditional sliders like they used to use. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to click on midtones first. Now with the midtones, it's going to affect the middle of your image. So you see how there's the middle pixels with the exposure is everywhere here. It's exactly kind of where you want it, but that's way too strong. So I'm going to come up here and just make it a little bit orange and just slide it back to maybe 10. You see how it's kind of making the image right here be a little bit more of that sunset after work vibe that I'm kind of going for now. So I'm not going to click highlights. Now you can add whatever highlights you want. You can make the highlights green if you want. That's totally up to you, and that's what this allows you to do. This is where you make your art. Taking the photo is just one thing, but making it your own, that's what we're doing right now. So I'm going to come here, make it look a little bit yellow because highlights are supposed to be brighter than the midtones. And I'm just going to maybe right there, maybe it's a little bit more yellow. So I'm going to come down here and just slide it a little bit more to the left. Maybe like 57, 56 is fine. And then slide this down to maybe 10. Now before and after, before, after. It's really only affecting this area right here on the can, which is perfect. Now with the shadows, literally everything else is shadows. So we're going to just very slightly drag this up to the green because we're going to be hitting a lot of this background area. You can see that there's a lot of greens and the complementary colors of yellow back here. So we're just going to make it slight, just a little bit, just to enhance that green. So there's like a ever-present like ambiance. Maybe just a little too much. Perfect. Love it. All right, now I'm done with that. I'm going to come up here to the curve layer again. Now, if you hit this back little bottom area here, you drag it up, it makes your image, it brings up all like the darkest parts of your image, and it makes it like this cool like haziness, which was like so popular a couple years ago. Every photographer was doing it in every photo. But now it's kind of played out. I use it slightly. See, like that's too much for me. So I'm going to go back to curves and just bring that back down to maybe like right about there, good 12. So now your blacks is what controls that. So you're making the blacks brighter, but this is bringing it back down, and it makes the blacks be just a little bit more satin, just a little bit softer. Now contrast, crank that up just a little bit. Okay. Bring up the vibrance just a little bit more. Got the saturation. Leave the saturation where it's at. Hit OK. And there you have it. That's the done photo. I'm going to group these together so you can see what the before and after looks like. So you could group them together and then hit the group button, and there you go. Before, after. Before, after. Well, everybody, that's how I edited that photo. Please go subscribe to my channel. The link's going to be down below for my YouTube channel. I really appreciate all the support you give me. But my beer is about to be done. The photo's about to be done. It's time for bed.